Hello Internet! Andrew Potter back again for another episode of the Night Circus. Just a bit of housekeeping first because today was Andrew's first day back at school. Yay! Magic! Which leads into the conversation of what's going to happen with this channel for the next couple of months, as I will be in school almost every day, as well as working to try to pay for the school, so that way I can get a job which pays for the loan, which pays for the school, which pays for... Anyways, so the plan is to try to keep up with the uploads. The plan is for there to not be a change in the plan, but if I find that's too much, I'm going to slow down the channel to 3 videos a week, which will be a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which will hopefully make that faster. Or I might just do weekend uploads, so that way, but I'm probably just going to do the Monday, Wednesday, Friday plan first, and then if I'm still finding it's too much, we'll go down to 2 videos a week, which would be a Saturday and a Sunday upload. As I would only have work to deal with and any homework or anything like that, but even then I can find time during the week or something like that to do homework, so because I won't be worried about uploads and things like that. But, so the immediate plan is for there to be no changes in the plan and that there should still be 5 videos a week, but I'm just giving you guys pre-warning that in case something, in case I find it's being too much, I won't be doing that. For anyone's curious as to what I'm doing for school, since I already have my Bachelor's of Arts with a major in English for school, this year what I'm doing is I'm going to do a Bachelor of Arts with a major in Sociology. The reason I'm doing that is because I was left unaware and not informed well by my school that psychology as a social science doesn't actually count as a social science. So it's not actually teachable, it just counts as, what did they have it listed? I think they have it listed as an arts or something. Either way, anyway, it's not listed as its own, as a social science, even though most of the courses offered of sociology, or psychology at my school are listed as social sciences. The program itself doesn't count as a social science, because you can technically just take it as a science, which then leads to a Bachelor of Science, which is not Bachelor of Arts, which then is not technically teachable for some reason, even though, math and sciences are, and many high schools, at least in Nova Scotia, are actually teach psychology as a class you can take in grade 12s. The point is, it's not technically teachable, neither is philosophy. So I have to take, so I have English as my only teachable currently at the moment, and then I have to take sociology now, which will then be my second teachable. And even though psychology and philosophy are both being considered to be teachables in the very near future, they aren't currently, so I can't apply that as a teachable, because they may not be in the future, and they aren't currently. So therefore, I have to take this as a second teachable. So my schedule is thankfully looking very, it isn't very high for school. I only have 1 class a day, Monday through Thursday, so I have Fridays off still, and I have evenings off all of those days. I only have 1 class a day in the afternoon, so I only have that, so that's not too bad. But point is, that's not bad. Also, fair warning, because, again, I'm not starting a timer. I don't know how long this video is going to be going on for and everything like that, or how long I've just been talking to you, but this chapter is looking a little longer in the Night Circus, so I will only be doing the 1 chapter, and I'm just hoping that, yeah, it's a full 10 pages, well, 9.5 pages, but I'm hoping I don't go over time on this one, so I'm hoping this one will be broken into 2 pieces, but if this video is titled something witty and funny, point 1, then you'll know that there's going to be a something witty and funny point 2 kind of thing. So there will be 2 parts, but I'm not sure of that yet, as now is not then, because that's how time works, unless you have this weird box that I've heard of. But point is, I don't have a weird box, so I don't know yet what's going to happen, so I can't predict how this is going to go. But as of right now, I think it'll just be a one video, because I do have, like, it is like 30 some minutes that I can go for before it cuts me off. So let us just hope that that doesn't happen. And let's start the reading. So let's see, the last chapter took place between 1875 and 1880. This chapter takes place, only between a couple of months. Only in London, so we're only going to be in London. And it's taking place between May and June of 1884. And I think it's called Le Battler. Again, I'm not good at my French, so Le Battler, something. Let's get started. Just before the boy turns 19, the man in the grey suit removes him from the townhouse without notice, setting him up in a modestly sized flat with a view of the British Museum. At first he assumes that it is only a temporary matter. There have been, of late, journeys of weeks or even months to France and Germany and Greece, filled with more studying than sightseeing. This is not one of those not-quite holidays spent in luxurious hotels. This is a modest flat with basic furnishings, so similar to his former rooms that he finds it difficult to feel anything resembling homesickness, save for the library, though he still possesses an impressive number of books. There is a wardrobe full of well-cut but nondescript black suits, crisp white shirts, a row of custom-fitted bowler caps. He inquires as to what is referred to only as his challenge will begin. The man in the grey suit will not say, though the move clearly marks the end of formal lessons. Instead, he continues his studies independently. He keeps notebooks full of symbols and glyphs, working through his old notes and finding a new element to consider. He carries smaller volumes with him at all times, transcribing them into larger ones once they are filled. He begins each notebook the same way, with a detailed drawing of a tree inscribed with black ink inside the front cover. From there, the black branches stretch into the subsequent pages, tying together lines that form letters and symbols, each page almost completely covered in ink. All of it, runes and words and glyphs, twisted together and grounded to the initial tree. There is a forest of such trees, carefully filled in his bookshelves. He practices the things he has been taught. Though it is difficult to gauge the effectiveness of his illusions on his own, he spends a great deal of time regarding reflections in mirrors. Unscheduled and no longer under lock and key, he takes long walks around the city. The sheer volume of people is nerve-wracking, but the joy is being able to leave his flat whenever he chooses outweighs his fears of accidentally bumping into passers-by as he attempts to traverse the streets. He sits in parks and cafes, observing people who pay him little notice as he blends into crowds of young men in interchangeable suits and bowler hats. One afternoon he returns to his old townhouse, thinking perhaps he would not be in position to call on his instructor for something as simple as tea, but the building is abandoned, the windows boarded. As he walks back to his flat, he places a hand on his pocket and realizes that his notebook is missing. He swears aloud, attracting a glare from passing women who step aside as he stops short on the crowded pavement. He retraces his steps, growing more anxious with each turn. A light rain begins to fall, not much more than mist, but several umbrellas spring up amongst the crowd. He pulls the brim of his bowler hat down to better shield his eyes as he searches the dampening pavement for any sign of his notebook. He stops at a corner beneath the awning of a cafe, watching the lamps flicker on up and down the street, wondering if he should wait until the crowd thins or the rain lets up. Then he notices that there is a girl standing some paces away, also sheltered beneath the awning, and she is poring over the pages of a notebook that he is quite certain is his own. She is perhaps 18, perhaps a bit younger. Her eyes are light, and her hair is in an indeterminate color that cannot seem to decide if it's blonde or brown. She wears a dress that would have been quite fashionable 2 years ago, and is damp from the rain. He steps closer, but he does not notice. She stays completely absorbed in the book. She has even removed one of her gloves to better handle the delicate pages. He can now see that it is indeed his own journal, open to a page with a card pasted onto it, printed with winged creatures crawling over a spoked wheel. His handwriting covers the card and the paper around it, incorporated into solid text. He watches her expression as she flips through the pages, a mixture of confusion and curiosity. "I believe you have my book," he says after a moment. The girl jumps in surprise and nearly drops the notebook, but manages to catch it, though in the process her gloves flutter to the pavement. He bends down to retrieve it, and when he straightens and offers it to her, she seems surprised to see that he is smiling at her. "I'm sorry," she says, accepting her glove and quickly pushing the journal at him. "You dropped it in the park, and I was trying to give it back to you, but I lost track of you, and then I'm sorry," she stops, flustered. "That's quite all right," he says, relieved to have it back in his possession. "I was afraid it was lost for good, which would have been unfortunate. I owe you my deepest gratitude, Miss Martin," she supplies, and it sounds like a lie. "Isabel Martin." A questioning look follows, waiting for his own name. "Marco," he says. "Marco Alasdair." The name tastes strange on his tongue, the opportunities to speak it aloud falling few and far between. He has written this variant of his given name combined with a form of his instructor's alias so many times that it seems like his own, but adding sound to symbol is a different process entirely. The ease at which Isabel accepts it makes it feel more real. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Alasdair, she says. He should thank her and take his book and go. It is the sensible thing to do, but he is not particularly inclined to return to his empty flat. "Might I buy you a drink as a token of my thanks, Miss Martin?" he asks, after slipping the notebook into his pocket. Isabel hesitates, likely knowing better than to accept invitations for drinks from strange men on darkened street corners, but to his surprise she nods. "That would be lovely, thank you," she says. "Very well," says Marco, "but there are better cafes than this particular one." He gestures at the window next to them. "Within a reasonable distance if you don't mind a damp walk. I'm afraid I don't have an umbrella with me." "I don't mind," Isabel says. Marco offers her his arm, which she takes, and they set off down the street in the softly falling rain. They walk only a block or two and then down a rather narrow alley, and Marco can feel her tense in the darkness, but she relaxes when he stops at a well-lit doorway next to a stained glass window. He holds the door open for her as they enter a tiny cafe, one that has quickly become his favorite over the past few months, one of the few places in London where he feels truly at ease. Candles flicker in glass holders on every available surface, and the walls are painted a rich, bold red. There are only a few patrons scattered around the intimate space and plenty of empty tables. They sit at a small table near the window. Marco waves at the woman behind the bar, who then brings them 2 glasses of Bordeaux, leaving the bottle on the table next to a small vase holding a yellow rose. As the rain patters gently against the windows, they converse politely about insubstantial things. Marco volunteers very little information about himself, and Isabel responds in kind. When he asks if she is hungry, she gives a polite non-answer that betrays that she is famished. He catches the attention of the woman behind the bar again, who returns a few minutes later with a platter of cheese and fruit and slices of baguette. "However did you find a place like this?" Isabel asks. "Trial and error," he says, "and a great many glasses of a horrible wine." Isabel laughs. "I'm sorry," she says, "though at least it worked out well in the end. This place is lovely. It's like an oasis." "An oasis with very good wine," Marco agrees, tipping his glass towards her. "It reminds me of France," Isabel says. "Are you from France?" he asks. "No," Isabel says, "but I lived there for a while." "As did I," Marco says. "Though that was some time ago. And you are correct, this place is very French. I think that's part of the charm. So many places here don't bother to be charming." "You're charming," Isabel says, and immediately blushes, looking like she would pull the words back into her mouth if she could. "Thank you," Marco replies, unsure what else to say. "I'm sorry," Isabel says, clearly flustered. "I didn't mean to—" She begins to trail off, but perhaps emboldened by a glass and a half of wine, she continues. "There are charms in your book," she says. She looks to him for a reaction, but he says nothing, and she looks away. "Charms," she continues to fill the silence. "Talismans, symbols. I don't know what all of them mean, but they are charms, are they not?" She takes a nervous sip of the wine before daring to look back at him. Marco chooses his words carefully, wary about the direction the conversation is taking. "And what does a young lady who lived in France knows of charms and talismans?" he asks. "Only things I've read in books," she says. "I don't remember what all of them mean. I only know the astrological symbols and some of the alchemic ones. I don't know them particularly well, either." She pauses, as though she cannot decide whether or not she wants to elaborate, but then she adds, "Le Roue de Fortune, the Wheel of Fortune, the card in your book. I know that card. I have a deck myself." While earlier Marco had determined her to be little more than mildly intriguing and fairly pretty, this revelation is something more. He leans into the table regarding her with considerable increased interest than he had moments ago. Do you mean you read the tarot, Miss Martin? He asks. Isabel nods. I do. At least, I try, she says. Only for myself, though. Which I suppose is not really reading. It's something I picked up a few years ago. Do you have your deck with you? Marco asks. Isabel nods again. I would very much like to see it, if you don't mind, he adds, when she makes no move to take it from her bag. Isabel glances around the cafe at the other patrons. Marco gives a dismissive wave. Don't worry yourself about them, he says. It takes a great deal more than a deck of cards to frighten this lot. But if you would rather not, I understand. No, I don't mind, Isabel says, picking up her bag and carefully pulling out a deck of cards wrapped in a scrap of black silk. She removes the cards from their covering and places them atop the deck. May I? Marco asks as he moves to pick them up. By all means, Isabel answers, surprised. Some readers do not like other people touching their cards, Marco explains, recalling the details from his divination lessons as he gently lifts the deck. I would not want to be presumptuous. He turns over the top card. The Battler. The Magician. Marco cannot help but smile at the card before replacing it in the pile. Do you read? Isabel asks him. Oh no, he says. I'm familiar with the cards, but they do not speak to me, not in ways enough to properly read. He looks up from the cards at Isabel, still not certain what to make of her. They speak to you, though, do they not? I've never thought of it that way, but I suppose they do, she says. She sits quietly, watching them flip through the deck. He treats it with the same care she showed with his journal, holding the cards delicately by their edges. When he has looked through the entire deck, he places them back on the table. They're very old, he says. Much older than you, I would like to venture to guess. Might inquire as to how they came into your possession. I found them in a jewelry box in an antique shop in Paris years ago, Isabel says. The woman there wouldn't even sell them to me. She just told me to take them away. Get them out of her shop. Devil cards, she called them. Cartes du diable. People are naive about such things, Marco says. A phrase oft repeated by his instructor as both admonishment and warning. And they would rather write them off as evil than attempt to understand them. An unfortunate truth, but a truth nonetheless. What is your notebook for? Isabel asks. I don't mean to pry, I just found it interesting. I hope you will forgive me for looking through it. Well, we're even on that matter now that you have allowed me to look through your cards, he says. But I'm afraid it is a rather complex and not the easiest of matters to explain or believe. I can believe quite a lot of things, Isabel says. Marco says nothing but watches her as intently as he had regarded her cards. Isabel holds his gaze and does not look away. It is too tempting. To have found someone who might even begin to understand the world he has lived in almost his entire life. He knows he should not let it go. He should let it go, but he cannot. I could show you if you wish, he says after a moment. I would like that, Isabel says. They finish their wine and Marco settles their bills with the woman behind the bar. He places his bowler cap on his head and takes Isabel's arm as they leave the warmth of the cafe, stepping out once again into the rain. Marco stops abruptly in the middle of the next block, just outside a large gated courtyard. It is set back from the street, a cobblestone alcove formed by grey stone walls. This will do, he says. He leads Isabel off the pavement and into the space between the wall and the gate, positioning her so her back is against the cold, wet stone, and stands directly in front of her, so close that she can see each drop of rain on the brim of his bowler hat. Do for what? She asks, apprehension creeping into her voice. The rain is still falling around them, and there is nowhere to go. Marco simply raises a gloved hand to quiet her, concentrating on the rain and the wall behind her head. He has never had someone to try this particular feat on before, and he is uncertain he will even be able to manage it. Do you trust me, Miss Martin? He asks, watching her with the same intense stare from the cafe, only this time his eyes are barely inches from her own. Yes, she says without hesitation. Good, Marco says, and with a swift movement he lifts his hand and places it firmly over Isabel's eyes. Very, very Disney Aladdin. Very, very Disney Aladdin, so we'll see how that goes. Startled, Isabel freezes. Her vision is obscured completely. She can see nothing and feels only the damp leather against her skin. She shivers and is not entirely sure it is due to the cold or the rain. A voice close to her ear whispers words she has to strain to hear, and that she does not understand. And then she can no longer hear the rain, and the stone wall behind her feels rough when moments before it had been smooth. The darkness is somehow brighter, and then Marco lowers his hand. Blinking as her eyes adjust to the light, Isabel first sees Marco in front of her, but something is different. There are no drops of rain on the brim of his hat. There are no drops of rain at all. Instead, there is sunlight casting a soft glow around him, but that is not what makes Isabel gasp. What elicits the gasp is the fact that they are standing in a forest, her back pressed up against a huge ancient tree trunk. The trees are bare and black, their branches stretching into the bright blue expanse of sky above them. The ground is covered in a light dusting of snow that sparkles and shines in the sunlight. It is a perfectly winter day, and there is not a building in sight for miles, all an expanse of snow and wood. A bird calls in a nearby tree, and one in the distance answers it. Isabel is baffled. It is real. She can feel the sun against her skin and the bark of the tree beneath her fingers. The cold of the snow is palpable, though she realizes her dress is no longer wet from the rain. Even the air she's breathing into her lungs is unmistakably crisp country air, with not a hint of London smog. It cannot be, but it is real. This is impossible, she says, turning back to Marco. He smiles, his bright green eyes dazzling in the winter sun. Nothing is impossible, he says. Isabel laughs, the high-pitched, delighted laugh of a child. A million questions rush through her head, and she cannot properly articulate any of them. And then a clear image of a card springs suddenly into her mind. Le Bateleur. You're a magician, she says. I don't think anyone has actually called me that before, Marco responds. Isabel laughs again, and she is still laughing when he leans closer and kisses her. The pair of birds circle overhead as a light wind blows through the branches of the trees around them. To passers-by on the darkened London street, they look like nothing out of the ordinary, only young lovers kissing in the rain. Well, interesting. Because I thought somehow he had just teleported them, was the trick, was what it was. But it seems to be more sort of a reality marble, if anyone has heard the term before. A reality marble is basically is a sort of elusive sort of magic where one transforms the area around them, but the area itself is not transformed. By that I mean, somehow Marco and Isabel are in this forest. Physically they are in this forest. But to everyone around them, that part of London didn't just collapse on itself, it is still London. Somehow it manipulates the space in a way that two different people can view the same space in two completely different ways. A reality marble, basically, it encapsulates something. To the person inside the marble, everything is just blue, we'll say. You know, a blue marble. Everything around them is blue. But to the outside, it has that layer of, it has that layer of glass, of plastic, of what have you. But should they enter into that space, however big or small, then they would see the same thing. They would see the forest, they would see the snow, all that kind of thing. So I guess that's what Marco's doing, which, from every series I've heard of it, is rather impressive magic. I also think that Isabel here is Celia, trying something. If I'm being completely honest, I think Prospero has found Marco and wants Celia to see what it is, what's his type of magic, what sort of magic is Marco doing, so that way when she does the task, when they do the challenge, she already knows what kind of magic he can do, or at least his level of magic or something along those lines. So now she'll know that Marco can do reality marbles, and continues on with that. So that's what I think that is. Everything else seems interesting enough at this point. Nothing has gone too crazy or anything like that. I'm excited for more, and everything should be fine. if there was anything in that chapter in particular you wanted me to go on about, then put that in the comments below. And of course, feel free to give me a like and a subscribe. Thank you and have a good night.